Hi, it's Ginger. Welcome or welcome back to the Copycat Quilter channel. After that first video, I started thinking about those triangles that were in that quilt, and I didn't do a great job of explaining how to make those, but then I started looking for other ways that you might be able to do those same triangles. Now these are isosceles triangles. I had a little math lesson from my expert, and she explained to me that isosceles is actually a group of triangles, and you have acute, you have obtuse, and you have equilateral. And these actually are not equilateral, because an equilateral meant that all the legs would be the same. And on these legs that go up to the top are actually a little longer than the one that goes across the bottom. We can all agree it is a triangle in a square. So I want to show you how to make these and show you a couple of different methods, and then check back in. So in my very first video, I made a quilt that used isosceles triangles, or triangle in a square, and I told you that I cut them with my Accuquilt Go, and I'm going to demonstrate that in a minute. But when I started looking around for ways to cut it without Accuquilt, I found there weren't a lot of ways to do it. So I thought I would show you a couple of ways that you can cut those triangles, and then you can decide which one works best for you. So the first one I wanted to show you is this one that uses these specialty rulers. It uses the TriRec rulers, and there's two pieces to it. It's hard to see. There's the piece that cuts the triangle, and then there's the piece that cuts the sides to go on it. Like that. And they're not just half and half, which is kind of what you would think they might be. Because of the 1/4 inch seam allowances, there's a little math involved, and none of us like to do math. So the first thing to use those rulers is to cut 6.5 inch strips if I want to make a 6.5 inch triangle. And the other quilt that I made has 6.5 inch triangles. I'll cut some of these, and then I can throw them in my bin so that I can make triangles for days when I am so inclined. So I'm cutting that edge to make it straight. Then I'm going to count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5. I know some people don't like to use their mat lines, and they say the ruler lines are more accurate, or vice versa. Again, I am not the precise quilter. That is a different channel. My seam allowances aren't so perfect that a little 1/16 or 32nd of an inch is going to make that much difference. So this is 6.5 inch strip. I'm cutting through a lot of layers of fabric here, but I have a nice new sharp rotary blade, so that should work out fine. So from this strip, this is the center triangle. I'm going to cut darks or mediums, and then for the side pieces I'm going to cut a light color, because that's the pattern that was in my quilt. So to use this ruler, and again it's going to be a little difficult with the glare, you line the 6.5 inch. It has different lines for what size you want to make: 6.5, 5.5, 4.5, 5, blah blah blah. So I want to make a 6.5 inch square, triangle in a square. So I'm going to line the bottom up with the 6.5 inch mark. Let's see if I get it. And then I'm going to cut up both sides. I'm wasting a little fabric there, but that doesn't bother me too much. I have enough fabric to last the rest of my life, plus some. And I will be leaving some as inheritance for my children who don't quilt. So there I've cut, I guess I was cutting 2 layers of fabric. I've cut 2 of those. If you notice, the top end of this is blunt. That's so when we sew those other triangles, we'll end up with that perfect 1/4 inch at the top to keep our points on the quilt. I'll show you that in a minute. So then to make the next cut, you can lay it upside down. And that angle is already perfect. So just cut this side. And I will cut 2 more just for fun. Line up the bottom. Looks like maybe I got off a little on that last cut. So I will. It's kind of hard to cut sideways like that. I do have a rotating mat that you can use, so you don't have to pick the fabric up and spin it around if you don't want to be cutting towards yourself. But I've used a rotary cutter for a long time, and knock on wood, haven't cut myself before, or not badly. So these rulers are designed to cut the triangle in one piece, and then these side triangles that fit onto it to make it into a square. If you see, I had to flip it over to get this side because they are mirror images of each other. So if you're working with a fabric like this that has a right and wrong side, you're going to need to make sure that you cut usually with the right sides together or with wrong sides together, but make sure that you're noticing if you're getting both sides of the triangles the way you need to. And I've got that upside down. So that way or this way. So for the design that I was working on before, it had a dark triangle and then light sides. So it looks like this. So let me show you how you would cut those. Now I've cut 6-inch strips here. And I had a longer strip, but this is all I have left of it. So let's see if I can get 2 sides out of this. So to cut the sides, I have a 6.5-inch strip because that's how tall I want the block to be. I want it to be a 6.5-inch block finished. So if I line this up on the edge, that one's not quite enough. Let's see if I can get it this way. There we go. So I can line up this side and this side and make the cut this way. This side is blunt. It's not a point. So one of the other things I wanted to show was a wonky triangle. I really like wonky. I'm not the precision quilter again. So wonky triangles or wonky blocks can be kind of fun, especially for a beginner, because you don't worry about if the points match or if you've got that exact 1/4 inch seam. You kind of just make it work. And so that's a fun way maybe to start off quilting. So I'm going to take the same 6.5-inch strip. You can see that's where I cut the last one. But I really don't want to use that because it's too precise and we're doing wonky. So I'm just going to cut a line like that. And then I'm kind of going to plan sort of about how I want that triangle to look. And I got a lot of fabric slippage there. So I'm going to do that. It doesn't look as wide as the other one, but again, this is wonky. To cut the side pieces for my wonky triangle, I need to be careful. Since I cut this so skinny, I need a significantly wider piece than whenever I cut the even triangles. So I took fabric that is longer. It's a bigger strip than the 6.5. It's probably, looks like maybe about 7. And I'm going to use that to cut my side pieces so that I can be sure they're wide enough. So I'm just going to do this. I only cut the white. I did not cut the triangle. And then I'm going to take these 2 pieces and sew them onto each side of my triangle so that then I can cut it into a 6.5-inch square. Alrighty, I sewed the side corners on, and now when I get my 6.5-inch ruler, I can put it here, and boy, you can see I was still really close up there. This ruler is 6.5 inches square, which makes it really easy to cut 6.5-inch blocks and trim the wonky block up. You could sew it together wonky, but it gets a little bit of a challenge. I prefer to make my blocks wonky and then cut them square to add beside other squares. Something needs to be square. Whether you do it at the block level or at the setting level or at the very end. So here is my wonky triangle. This is my go-to way for cutting these triangles. I love the Accuquilt system and how precise it makes everything and easy to cut. So this is the mix and match companion set angles, and you use these 2 dies. I'm sorry it's difficult to get this all in the camera angle. So it uses 2 dies, the 13 and the 14. It's the triangles and the square, and then it's the triangles and the square sides. So with each Accuquilt die, you get some free patterns. get out of the box. This is a 12-inch cube, but the way that the cube system is, it's based on a set of 4. So it's 4 6-inches, which makes a 12 by 12 square. So I have the triangle piece. Let's see if I can find a piece of fabric big enough for that. Here's the fabric I'm going to cut. I would usually take more time to kind of pre-cut this to be where it was close to the size, so I'm not wasting quite so much fabric. But when you do Accuquilt, you want to be sure you have the label pointed at your belly. So I've got my fabric ready, and to make sure it's on the right angle for cutting, there are some instructions that go along with that. I'm going to lay it where it's kind of close to that edge. It matches this side. These are at an angle on purpose, and again, the instructions all with Accuquilt will tell you that. Accuquilt, everything gets covered with a mat to be able to cut. All of the blades are inside the die, so you don't have to worry about cutting your hands or sticking your hands into this unit. This happens to be the Accuquilt Go Big, which was my birthday Christmas present to myself. There is a small, much more affordable version that will take most of the dies. I just put this in. It feeds itself through. And when it comes out the other side, you have perfect triangles cut. The corners are blunted off the edges so that they're easy to meet up with the side triangles when you go to cut. The ruler doesn't blunt all of the edges, so it makes it a little not as simple to cut those side triangles or not to match them up whenever you're sewing. So let me grab the side triangle and find a piece of fabric for that. Oh, that will exactly fit. I will run that through. The Go Big is the only Accuquilt cutter that is electric like this. The others have a crank handle. They're still really easy to use. This was just an upgrade birthday treat for myself. Let me put this up here so you can see it easily. I'll take one of the triangles that we cut. I will take 2 of the side pieces that we cut, making sure the point is up there. I have sewn 1 or 2 together like that. Does not work, does not make the triangle the way you want it to look. So you can see whenever I fold these over, because those, they call them dog ears, are cut off. Sounds terribly cruel. You can see that they match up exactly. I don't have to worry about where to start and stop my needle. That tells me exactly where to cut. And here are the 3 different triangles. This triangle was the one that was cut using the rulers. I can tell because the ruler doesn't blunt these bottom corners. And I end up with some little, what they call the dog ears, sticking out. Not a big deal. You can always trim them off. It's just, that's how I know that was the triangle cut. Then, can't pick it up. This was the one cutting using Accuquilt. Still measures the 6.5 inches square. You can see I don't have the dog ears as much. Those are probably just where I didn't get my seam at exactly 1/4 inch. And then this is the wonky one. Any of these work fine. Obviously the rulers are less expensive than the Accuquilt, but I think I may have said I really love my Accuquilt. And then the wonky's kind of fun, especially if you're a new quilter, because you can cut it big, cut it down to the 6.5, and you don't have points then to match. And if you intentionally make the points don't match, then it doesn't matter if you don't make the points match. If you're really trying hard to be precise and some corners don't match, it'll show up pretty quickly. So this is how we could make those isosceles triangles, or triangles in a square, that a lot of quilts use in their blocks. So I hope you enjoyed watching these videos. I know I have learned a lot about triangles in the past few days, but I really enjoyed trying different things, including the wonky triangles. I really like to sew wonky because then it doesn't match and it's not supposed to, and who cares? You know, I've never made a wonky quilt that I gave someone as a gift or donated to charity that didn't bring me joy, and thinking about how much they might enjoy seeing something that's not perfect, because let's face it, none of us are. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, subscribe, hit that notify button if you want to, and come back and check out my next videos. Thanks a lot. Now, it looks like I have screwed up. This is another reason I don't really like the paper piecing. I didn't get this folded over enough to actually cover that top corner, so I'm going to lose that piece.